Welcome to English with Zenko Master. Get ready to learn something new today.
I was scrubbing the coffee machine for the third time that day when I heard my name over the intercom. I felt nervous all of a sudden. Usually, if someone from the top floor called me, it meant trouble. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked toward the back office, heart racing. I had only worked at the company for 5 months. Most people didn't even know my name. I made coffee, cleaned the kitchen, and sometimes delivered mail between departments. No one really spoke to me unless they needed something. I didn't mind, not at first. But lately, the silence had started to feel heavier. The receptionist at the front desk pointed me toward the elevator. She looked surprised, as if she couldn't believe someone like me was being asked to go upstairs. I felt that way too. When I stepped out onto the executive floor, I noticed the thick carpet under my shoes and the way the air felt cooler, more expensive. I walked slowly down the hallway, unsure of what I would find. Mr. Peters was standing near the window in a navy blue suit. He turned around as soon as I entered the room. I had seen him once before, walking through the lobby. People said he was the youngest director in the company's history. He always walked fast, spoke quietly, and made decisions no one questioned. He didn't ask me to sit down. He just looked at me and asked a question that left me frozen. "Do you know anything about spreadsheets?" I blinked. I didn't know how to answer. I hadn't touched a spreadsheet in over a year. But before I started cleaning floors and making coffee, I used to be a junior data assistant at another company. I had left that job after a bad experience, one I still didn't like thinking about. "I've used them before," I said finally. My voice sounded too small. He nodded and pointed to the screen. "Come look at this." I walked over, confused. He explained a report that had missing data. "Someone messed it up. I want to know if you can fix it." I stared at the numbers, then at the gaps in the table. My fingers itched to type. Without thinking, I moved the mouse and started adjusting the cells. I didn't say much, just worked quietly. After about 10 minutes, I stopped. "I think this is what you wanted," I said. My hands were shaking. Mr. Peters looked at the screen. He didn't smile, but he nodded. Then he did something no one else at the company had ever done. He thanked me by name. "Good work, Elise." That moment felt small, but to me, it was everything. He called me again the next week. This time it was about a schedule chart, then a data entry problem. Each time I helped, he gave me a few more minutes of his attention. He didn't talk much, but he saw me. That was new. People downstairs started asking questions. Why was the coffee girl being called to the top floor? Why did the director know her name? I didn't explain. I didn't know how to. Part of me was still afraid it would all disappear if I talked about it. One afternoon, I was restocking supplies when the HR manager walked by. She stopped and looked at me, then at the list in my hand. "Are you the one helping Mr. Peters with his reports?" I nodded. She tilted her head. "Interesting," she said, then walked away. That word, interesting, followed me for days. It felt like a warning and a compliment at the same time. The truth was, I had not always been a cleaner. A year earlier, I had worked in an office wearing heels and sending emails. I had plans, dreams, even a 5-year goal written in my journal. Then everything collapsed. A coworker I trusted took credit for my work. My supervisor believed him. I tried to defend myself, but no one listened. I was too quiet, too new, too unsure. When the project failed, they blamed me. I lost my job, and with it, my confidence. I stopped applying for real positions. I told myself I needed time to recover. Cleaning felt safe. No one expected much. No one could take anything from me if I didn't offer them anything. But something shifted the day Mr. Peters let me fix that spreadsheet. It wasn't just about the numbers. It was about being useful again, being seen again. He started giving me longer tasks. Sometimes he left instructions on his desk and asked me to finish something while he was in meetings. He trusted me more than I trusted myself. One evening, I was working late, going through files in the small corner room they gave me. I didn't hear him come in. When I looked up, he was holding a cup of coffee, the same kind I used to bring him. "I noticed you skipped dinner again," he said. "You're always here after everyone else leaves." I smiled awkwardly. I like the quiet. He didn't reply. He just placed the coffee on the table and said, "Keep going. You're doing well." That sentence stayed with me for weeks. By the 3rd month, I had my own login to the internal system. I was no longer delivering mail or cleaning the break room. I had a desk, a real one, with my name on it. People from other departments started emailing me for updates. They copied me on group reports. I still didn't feel like I belonged. Not completely, but I was starting to believe that maybe one day I could. One afternoon, the receptionist buzzed me. "You've been added to the weekly team meeting," she said. "Mr. Peters asked for you personally." My heart raced again. Not from fear this time, but from disbelief. I sat at the long glass table with 10 other people, all wearing suits and talking about revenue and targets. Mr. Peters glanced at me once, just enough to let me know he saw me. I stayed quiet. But when a question about the data chart came up, he turned to me. "Elise prepared that part. She can explain it." And so I did. That night, I cried on the bus ride home. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time in over a year, I felt proud of myself. Mr. Peters never gave me compliments in public. He didn't make speeches or offer encouragement with fancy words, but he gave me something better. His trust. And that trust changed everything. Before I share the rest of my story, I need to know, where are you listening from? Knowing someone hears me, understands me, gives me strength. The morning after my first team meeting, I walked through the office with my head a little higher. I still wore the same black flats and carried the same worn-out bag, but something inside me had changed. I was no longer the girl who stayed quiet in corners. People had heard my voice now, and they had listened. For weeks, I continued helping with small projects. Mr. Peters always knew exactly how much to give me. Not too little, not too much. He never pushed me with loud words or big pressure. He guided with silence, with space. That space gave me room to grow. One Thursday afternoon, he stopped by my desk. It was rare for him to come down. He placed a folder in front of me and said only, "This is yours now." Inside was a proposal draft, unfinished, unorganized. I looked up, confused. "I want you to complete it," he said. "You'll need to research our partner's data and suggest improvements. Deadline is Monday." That weekend, I didn't go out. I didn't watch TV. I worked in my small apartment, sitting on a plastic chair with my laptop balanced on an old box. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt important. When I brought it back on Monday, Mr. Peters didn't say much. He nodded, flipped through the pages, and set it aside. That was it. No smile, no feedback. But the next day, I saw the final version printed and signed by him, unchanged. I stared at the paper for a long time. My words were in a director's hands now. It felt unreal. The truth was, I still struggled with fear. Every time I was asked to do something new, a voice inside whispered, "You're not good enough." That voice had lived in me for years. I had carried it since the day my old manager accused me of lying. Even now, with everything going well, I expected something to fall apart. But Mr. Peters never made me feel small. Even when he gave me corrections, they came with trust. He expected me to figure things out, and somehow I always did. One afternoon, while I was double-checking a report, he came into the room and leaned on the door frame. "You've been quiet lately," he said. I looked up, surprised. "I've been trying not to make mistakes." He raised an eyebrow. "You're allowed to make mistakes. That's how people learn." It was such a simple sentence, but I carried it with me like a shield. After 3 months in the new role, I was offered a temporary contract as a project assistant. It came with better pay, real hours, and a desk closer to the main floor. I still didn't have a title that made people turn their heads, but I was no longer invisible. During one of the bigger project launches, Mr. Peters let me present my own section. The room was filled with department leads. I had prepared for days. My hands were shaking slightly, but I didn't stutter. I explained the numbers, answered questions, and finished right on time. After the meeting, he gave me a look. Not a smile, but something quiet and proud. That was all I needed. One evening, I stayed late to finish a performance chart. The office lights were dim, and most people had gone home. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Mr. Peters. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he looked at the chart and said, "You've done good work, Elise." Those words meant more to me than any bonus. He had never given compliments easily, but when he did, they were real. I swallowed hard and nodded. "Thank you." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "You're ready for more." That night, I cried quietly on the train home. Not out of sadness, out of something deeper. Gratitude, relief, all mixed together. When the quarterly review period came around, I was called to HR. I thought it was a mistake. I hadn't been there long. I wasn't on any official list for promotion. But the HR manager smiled at me and said, "Mr. Peters has nominated you for a permanent analyst position. He says you've proven yourself." I didn't know what to say. My hands were cold. My mouth went dry. "You'll need to go through the formal interview, of course," she added. "But it's mostly a formality." That week, I prepared harder than ever. I reviewed case studies, updated my resume, and practiced my answers late into the night. I didn't want to disappoint him. Or myself. When the interview day came, I wore my best shirt, the one I had ironed the night before 3 times. I stepped into the room and faced the panel. I spoke slowly, clearly, with confidence I didn't know I had. When I finished, one of the panelists said, "We can see why Mr. Peters believes in you." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about work. This was about becoming someone I could be proud of. A week later, I received the offer. Full-time position. Full benefits. My own nameplate. I walked into my new office with tears in my eyes. Mr. Peters didn't make a big deal about it. But as I passed his office, he nodded once. That was his way of saying, "You earned this." And I had. Before Mr. Peters, I had almost forgotten who I was. I had let one failure define me. But he reminded me that people are more than their worst moments. He gave me space to try again. And because of that, my life changed. Not all at once. Not with fireworks. But slowly, through trust, tasks, and quiet support. I had been in my new position for 4 months when I got the email that changed everything again. The company was expanding into 2 new regions, and Mr. Peters had been chosen to lead the project. It was a big move. Larger teams, more responsibilities, and a chance to build something from the ground up. He was forming a new task group, and my name was on the list. I stared at the message for a long time. I was going to be part of the foundation for a major initiative. Me. The woman who once mopped floors and made coffee without looking anyone in the eye. On our first team call, Mr. Peters introduced everyone. He didn't say much about me, just mentioned that I'd be handling critical analytics and supporting team leads. But the tone in his voice when he said my name said everything. He trusted me. And now, others would too. Working on the new project wasn't easy. I had to juggle complex schedules, track endless data points, and manage people who had more experience than I did. Some team members were polite. Others questioned why someone like me had such a central role. One manager in particular made things difficult. He sent back every report I submitted with red comments. He questioned my conclusions in meetings. At first, I tried harder, more data, more charts. But the comments kept coming. One evening, after a long call with that same manager, I sat alone in the office kitchen. The light above flickered softly. I stared at my laptop, wondering if maybe I wasn't ready after all. That's when Mr. Peters walked in. He didn't sit down. He just stood across from me and asked quietly, "Is the pressure getting to you?" I nodded slowly. "A little." He watched me for a second. "You're not here by accident." I didn't know what to say. I just looked at the table. Then he added, "He challenges everyone. It's not personal. Keep going." That was all he said before walking out. But his words stayed with me. I started building confidence the hard way, by facing it. Each time that manager pushed back, I responded calmly with data, logic, and care. Slowly, the tone of his emails softened. One day, he even sent me a quick message. "Good work on the latest file." That short sentence felt like a mountain moved. I began leading my own calls, preparing summaries for senior leaders, and managing junior analysts. I trained them using the same quiet guidance I had once received. Clear expectations, steady support, space to grow. I started noticing something else too. I was no longer waiting for someone to tell me what I could do. I was simply doing it. By the time the regional expansion was ready to launch, our team had met every deadline. On the final day of preparation, Mr. Peters held a briefing for the executive board. I stood by the wall, ready to provide data if needed. Halfway through the meeting, he turned and said, "Elise prepared the final metrics and projections. She can walk you through them." And I did, calmly, professionally. The board members nodded. One of them even asked me a follow-up question, and I answered without hesitation. When the meeting ended, a woman from operations smiled at me and said, "You speak like someone who's been doing this for years." I smiled back. "Thank you. It's been a journey." That evening, I stayed back in the office to clean up my folders and send a few wrap-up emails. The halls were empty. The lights were low. But I didn't feel small in that space anymore. I felt ready. As I was packing my things, Mr. Peters stepped into the room. He looked around, then said, "Good work today." "Thanks," I replied, still feeling the nerves in my stomach. He didn't leave. Instead, he looked directly at me and said, "You've grown, not just in skill, in presence." That word stayed in my mind. Presence. I had never thought about myself that way before. But now, I understood. I wasn't just filling a role. I was becoming someone. The next week, he asked to meet with me privately. We sat in his office, the same place where I once stood nervously, unsure why I had been called. He got straight to the point. "I'm recommending you for the associate lead role in the next project cycle. It's time." I didn't speak right away. My hands felt cold, and my heart beat faster. I had dreamed about a moment like this, but I hadn't expected it so soon. "I don't know what to say," I finally whispered. "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "You've already shown it." I accepted the role. The first time I led a full team meeting, I stood at the head of the table and looked out at faces waiting for direction. I took a breath and began. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. And at the end, when the meeting ended, people thanked me for leading. Afterwards, as I walked back to my office, I passed by the coffee station. Someone else was there. A young woman in a faded uniform, arranging supplies quietly. She looked up and gave me a small, tired smile. I smiled back and asked, "How long have you been here?" "About a month," she said softly. "Still learning my way around." I nodded. "I used to be where you are." Her eyes widened. "Really?" "Really." She looked surprised, maybe even confused. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. But I made a note in my mind to remember her name, to ask her next time how she was doing, because I knew how much that mattered. Months passed. I kept growing. The company launched 2 more projects, and I led the analytics teams for both. Mr. Peters was promoted again, this time to a regional executive role. He moved offices, started traveling more. We didn't work as closely anymore, but he always made time to check in. One afternoon, as we passed in the hallway, he stopped and said, "You've come far?" I smiled. "Thanks to you." He shook his head. "No. I opened a door. You walked through it." And that was the truth. Now, when I think back to that first day, standing by the coffee machine with my apron, heart full of fear, I hardly recognize that version of myself. But I don't forget her. She reminds me of where I began, and of the person who looked past my uniform, past my silence, and saw something worth believing in. Mr. Peters never gave big speeches. He never promised success, but his belief in me was steady, quiet, and strong. And that belief, more than any title or role, gave me the courage to change my life. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share. More emotional and inspiring stories are coming soon.